We've titled this series from the book of Exodus as Redemption from Slavery. We are going to look at it in two levels. We talked about this last week. In one level, you're going to read through the stories, the historic accounts of the Hebrews, and you're going to be applying, you're going to see yourself in their lives, you're going to see yourself in their circumstances, and you're going to be applying it personally to your lives, right? And that is one level where we're going to read. But the other level is to really, from a macro kind of a perspective, see what God is doing across culture, across time to bring about His redemptive purposes, right? So you're gonna see it in a very personal level, but also in a global gospel level. Last week we looked at chapter 1 and the Hebrews were 70 people when they moved to Egypt, but they are flourishing, multiplying, they are spreading. There is a new Pharaoh who kind of forgotten who Joseph was. It's been 430 years now, and so people have forgotten Joseph. And because the Hebrews were fruitful and multiplying and growing stronger, the Egyptians were getting a little scared, right? So because of that, Pharaoh decides to control them. So he puts taskmasters over them. He puts heavy burdens on them. He makes their lives bitter. He treats them as slaves. But even in the midst of that, they are fruitful. And then he calls these midwives and he instructs them, he commands them saying, if you see a baby boy that's born, and these are the midwives who help the babies, mothers give birth, and if you see a baby boy, I want you to kill them. But the midwives decide not to follow the orders, and so his plan is still not happening. People are still growing and multiplying. Right? And finally he tells all of the Egyptians, he says, hey, if you see a baby boy that is born, I want you to throw the baby into the Nile and kill the baby. In the midst of suffering, this is what we see, and this is a big picture of what happens in the life of a believer. This is what happens for us. In the midst of suffering, you see people flourishing. In the midst of bitter burdens, you see people blessed. In the midst of oppression, they are multiplying. And this is a picture of all those who follow God, right? And so here in chapter 2, today, this morning, I've titled this sermon, God of Providence. A God of Providence, a God who works behind the scenes. So we're going to see how God works behind the scenes in a couple of ways. Let's look at the story first and let's apply this in our lives. Firstly, verse 1, chapter 2, verse 1, Exodus. It says, now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. Now the names are not mentioned here, but as you go through the book of Exodus, we know that it's Amram and Jochebed. These are the parents of Moses. And verse 2, the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, meaning the child is healthy, she hid him 3 months. Now, this couple has other children, right? They're not mentioned here. You'll again see this in the story of Exodus. They have an older sister who's probably 6 to 10 years, and there is another son who is 3 years older, Miriam and Aaron, right? And so now this is the birth of Moses here. So the woman conceives and bears a son, and because of Pharaoh's decree to kill all the boys, this mother decides to hide the baby, and she's hiding him for 3 months. I want you to just imagine, right, trying to hide a baby and trying to keep it quiet for 3 months. Verse 3, when she could not hide him any longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and dabbed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. Right, so she basically cannot hide the baby any longer. The baby is becoming noisy and restless, and so she doesn't know what to do. How do you protect this baby? So she decides to make a basket. The basket, the name, the word for the basket is the same word for the ark in Genesis. Okay, so the question that immediately the readers are thinking about is, the listeners here, they're thinking about is, okay, is God going to save this baby in this little tiny ark? Right? And so she makes it out of just papyrus and leaves, and she kind of puts a little tar, bitumen and pitch is like a tar to kind of seal it from the water, and she lets it go in the river. Verse 4. And the sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. So the sister is following, right, along the banks to see where this little basket is floating. And look at what happens. Verse 5. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. While her young women walked beside the river, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. Now, sometimes we kind of miss what's happening. And I want you to kind of just put yourself in the shoes of this little Miriam. Miriam is 6 to 10 years old. She's kind of following to see where this basket is going. And suddenly she sees the daughter of Pharaoh coming, right? And because we know the story, we kind of don't really put ourselves in her shoes, right? Imagine, Pharaoh has basically told, I want all the babies to be killed. How do you think Pharaoh's daughter is going to be? What if Pharaoh's daughter is the same as Pharaoh? What if she is also as cruel as the Pharaoh? Right? Same DNA, same family, same fear, same anxiety, same policies. How is she going to be different? So this is an anxious moment here. Right? And so this little Miriam is watching, and to her surprise, to her just stunning observation, she's like, this is Pharaoh's daughter, and she doesn't know where this is going to happen. What if the Pharaoh's daughter comes and looks at the baby and says, well, throw the baby into the river? What's going to happen? Look at what happens. Verse 6. Verse 6. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him. What are the chances? What are the chances? She took pity on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Right? And the moment Miriam sees this, she jumps out of the bushes. Verse 7, then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, she jumps up. And I'm sure Miriam is probably wondering what to do. Maybe she should steal the baby and run. Maybe Miriam is there. I mean, we don't know what kind of person she is. We know she's very courageous and stuff. So she jumps out. She tells the Pharaoh's daughter, she says, shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. Right? What is this? Was this all planned? Was this all planned? I don't know. We don't know. We don't know the details. Did they time it in such a way that the Pharaoh's daughter will come? I mean, what if she doesn't come that day? What if there is a flood that day? What if there is a rain that day? Somebody just mentioned in the previous service, I mean, there are crocodiles in the river, right, in Nile, right? All of these things can happen. We don't know what is going to happen. We don't know if Pharaoh's daughter knew. Maybe Pharaoh's daughter is looking at this girl and like, I know what you're doing. I know what your plan is. But she's compassionate. She's compassionate. Right? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child, verse 9, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. Right? The mother is getting paid to nurse her own baby. So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. They say probably he was around 5 to 8 years at this time, right? Brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because, she said, I drew him out of the water. Man, what a spectacular thing that's happening here. But one thing you will, I don't know if you caught it already, but one thing you will see is, and notice is, where is God here? Where is God? God? There is no mention of God here. His name seems absent. And a lot of times, even in your lives, you seem to be working hard. You seem to be deciding. You seem to be pulling things. You seem to be trying for new opportunities. You seem to be coming up with ideas. And sometimes we feel like, man, where is God in all this? Where is God? Where is God? And we're going to see, even when his name is absent, he is present. Even when he is unseen, he is unmissable here. So how does God's providence work? He's a God of providence. He works behind the scenes. How does he work? We're going to see it in two ways. Firstly, God providentially works through his people. He's going to providentially work through his people. Right? The providence of God means God sovereignly governs, he sustains, he directs all things according to his glorious purpose and his divine will. How does he do it? One way he does it is through his people. Through his people. Look at what's happening here. God is using these 5 women here in chapter 1 and chapter 2. Right? Incredible. The women are the heroes here. Right? These 5 women, 2 midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, this mother and sister, even Pharaoh's daughter. What kind of people God uses? What kind of people God uses? One, we see these people are obscure. Right? Shiphrah and Puah, they are obscure. Obscure meaning they are unknown. They are unnoticed. They are underappreciated. They are insignificant. They are ordinary. Shiphrah and Puah, In some way, you can sense that they don't have children because God blessed them with families later, right? So that indicates, no, they don't have their own children, meaning they are carrying personal grief and public shame because of their social situation. They are not the ones who are called for parties. They are not the ones who are called to stand in front during the weddings. They are not called for your karaoke and for your game nights. No. People don't want to associate themselves with them. No, maybe God has cursed them. Maybe God is not answering the prayer. Maybe it is because of their sin. This is how people will look at them. People will jeer at them and ridicule them. Insignificant. They are living in obscurity. But yet, who are the people God uses? These are faithful people in obscurity. They are faithful. Shipra and poor. No. Nobody needs to see them. Nobody needs to notice them. Nobody needs to appreciate them. No. But in their mundane, in the world's eyes, what seems like an insignificant, what seems like an ordinary life, in their mundane and monotonous works of life, they are faithful in obscurity. What kind of women are these? They are powerless. They don't have any power. What is the power the mother has? The mother has no power. She cannot change anything. She cannot protect the baby. She's not able to do anything. What is the power the sister has? She's only 6 years or 10 years, whatever that age is. What power does she have? She's young. What power do the midwives have? Nothing. They are powerless. They are helpless. They are afraid. They are taking a huge risk here. And yet, these are women who were courageous in adversity. When opposition came, when challenges came, in their own small ways, they are courageous. This is what Scripture talks about these people. In Exodus 1:17, it says, the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded, but let the male children live. They feared God. What is that? It's not fear. No, they treasured God. They loved God. They cherished God above all things, that they could stand courageously. Look at what Hebrews 11:25 talks about. The mother, by faith, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith. Well, how did she build this? How did she build this boat, little basket? Was she a science student? Was she know she's going to float? It's going to float? How? It is by faith. By faith, she hid the baby. By faith, she built this little basket. By faith, Miriam is following. By faith, all of these things are happening. Even Pharaoh's daughter, who's not a Hebrew, who's not a follower of God here, even her compassionate heart. My friend, God is weaving his redemptive story through ordinary, powerless, insignificant women who are faithful in obscurity. They are courageous in adversity. They are compassionate in hostility. And God is using all these people to bring about his purposes. I was listening to the story of during the mid-90s in China. There was a Chinese premier called, he's the leader of China at that time, Jiang Zemin, right? And so after Mao and all of those things, there was intense persecution for Christians, right? There was intense scrutiny, intense persecution, crackdown of any people who are gathering to worship. It was just intense. The 90s was an intense time, right? In China. So Jiang Zemin was the new premier. And so the group of people go to meet him, and they want to plead with him and say, hey, can you go a little easy on people who worship Jesus? So they go meet him, and they take a gift for him. As the culture, they exchange gifts, and so they take a gift. And the gift they gave him was the Gospel of John. And they basically told him, hey, this is the biography of this Jesus who we worship. Why don't you read it? And maybe that'll change your mind. And Jiang Zemin, he responds to them. He says, and he's an atheist. He's against all of these things, right? He responds to them saying, the only reason I'm receiving this gift from you is because growing up, he says, I had a nanny in my house who was a Christian. And she was kind to me. And that's the only reason I'm accepting this gift. Now, the story of the nanny, right? The story of the nanny. The nanny, she was a young woman. She wanted to be a missionary. She wanted to really serve God. And she'd applied to so many organizations, and nobody accepted her, and she was underqualified. So finally, she joined this family to work as a nanny. But even in that role, she was faithful. She faithfully loved this family and showed the compassion of Jesus and the love of Jesus. And we don't know how all this is connected. We don't know how all this is connected. But history tells us in the 90s, during Jiang Zemin, the pressure slowly lifted off China. Millions of people came to know Christ. Was it because of her faithfulness? No, I'm not saying it's her. Maybe there are so many people and God is working all of these things. But hey, that little girl's faithfulness was part of the story. I want you to understand, because sometimes in our culture, we are a bargaining culture. We like to get the best deal, right? We like to get the best for the cheapest, right? Sort it. Immediately sort any list, Amazon, sort it by cheapest, right? That's the first thing. Flight tickets, cheapest. Everything is sorted. I don't know why they have other sorting there, right? Like popular. Who wants popular? Who wants quicker? We don't want all that. Who wants quicker delivery? No. Cheaper, right? Just make it cheapest. And we bring that attitude to God. And we're like, okay, let me think about this. Oh, if I am faithful here, what does it get me? If I am courageous, if I stand for Jesus here, right? If I am compassionate, what am I getting out of this? What am I getting? I think I'm going to lose my job. I don't think this person, he's going to take advantage of me, right? This person is not going to pay me, right? This is how we constantly process life, but not these women. Not these women. They fear God. They fear God. They love God above all things. And even though it doesn't make sense, none of these women knew what God is doing. None of these women knew what outcome is going to happen, how things are going to play out. They had no idea. They had no idea. When she's building the basket, she doesn't know if it's going to float. When the Miriam is walking, she doesn't know who's going to come. None of these things, they have no idea what is happening. Pharaoh's daughter doesn't know. What if she takes the son and Pharaoh comes and kicks the baby out? What happened? Nobody knows how God is working. And yet, in the unknown, when they are unnoticed, they are faithful. 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 Why? God is noticing. God is noticing. They are courageous in opposition and adversity. Why? God is noticing. They are compassionate even when there is hostility and opposition. Compassionate. Why? God is noticing. And God uses. How does the God of Providence work? He uses their faithfulness and their courage and their compassion to bring about a deliverer. God uses his people's faithfulness and courage and compassion and tenacity. They are tenacious. Oh, they are tenacious. There's an absence of men here, right? There's an absence of men. No guy is mentioned. The only guy is Pharaoh, who's evil, right? Think of this, and this is true. This is true, and this is true for our culture, right? If the baby, and imagine this, if the baby is under threat, I don't know what Amram is doing. Amram is probably getting drunk on the side, getting drunk on his sorrows, right? Or he's probably working. Maybe they are working him as a slave somewhere and he's not doing that. Or maybe he's, whatever it is. But the mother is like, no. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something. I'm not going to give up here, right? I'm not going to give up. I'm going to build the basket. I'm going to build it. Well, I'm going to put some tar. I'm going to get some leaves. I'm going to seal it. I'm going to put the baby there. She doesn't know. But by faith, she trusts God. She trusts God and she's doing a work. She trusts God and she's creative. Look at Miriam. Man, Miriam. You're going to see Miriam later. She's tenacious. Oh, she loves her little brother. She's not going to take her eyes off the basket. Right? Imagine she's walking, she's observing where is this basket going. And when Pharaoh's daughter comes, I can just imagine she's going to go and do a karate kick or something, right? If they're going to throw the baby. She is watching, she's watching. And the moment she sees, okay, Pharaoh's daughter is a little compassionate, she comes and she gives this ridiculous idea. Hey, can I get a nurse for you? Right? She jumps out of the bushes. Can I get a nurse for you? Creative, relentless. Man, she is so shrewd. You're able to see these things. So my friends, even in your life, when there is opposition, when there is adversity, when there is obscurity, when all of these things come, how is your heart? Do you give up? You're like, well, Delhi traffic. Delhi traffic. My boss. My this, my that. Are we people who give up with excuses? God providentially works through your faithfulness, through your courage, through your compassion. You've got to trust it. You've got to trust it. It is here. You see this. Not only God works through his people, God works through all circumstances. All circumstances. And I want you to notice this. Think of this. What are the chances? Is it by chance? Is it by chance when Joseph was sold into slavery, right in Genesis, when Joseph was sold into slavery, is it by chance he ends up in Egypt? Is it by chance when he is rotting in prison, is it by chance that he ends up in the palace? Is it by chance the famine comes? Is it by chance that Joseph forgives his brothers? Was it by chance Shipra and Puah decide to defy the orders of Pharaoh? Was it by chance the mother makes the basket? Miriam follows the basket. Was it by chance Pharaoh's daughter comes and she's not a cruel daughter, she's a compassionate daughter? Was all this by chance? My friend, you're going to see, no. God is working through all circumstances. All circumstances. God is working behind the scenes. How does he work? He works through all circumstances by overcoming evil. Even if it is evil, God is able to overcome evil. God is able to overrule authority. Maybe there is authority in your life that is just pushing you down and oppressing, but yet God is able to work through by overruling all authority. God is able to overpower all obstacles. Maybe you're facing obstacles, but here is a God who can overpower any obstacle. He's able to oversee all the details of your life. He's able to overlook even your sin and foolishness by his mercy. This is how God works. Does that mean evil is okay? No, evil is not okay. Does that mean sin is okay? Sin is not okay. Does that mean suffering is okay? No, God takes no pleasure in suffering. And yet we live in a sinful, evil, wicked world ruled by Satan who wants to kill and oppress. And yet God works through all of these things to bring about his purposes for you. It is not apart from that. God is not saying, I'm going to remove you from the suffering. I'm going to remove you from the evil. No. God is saying, hey, I'll do even better. Through your suffering, through your pain, through your obstacles, he's going to bring out something good and glorious. He's saying, I'm going to do something great and glorious for my name. When God does something for his glory, you can be sure it is going to result for your great good, your greatest good. This is what God does. This is what God does. And I want you to observe this. I want you to observe what's happening here. God is working even through Jacob's deception. Jacob is a deceiver. You're talking to me, Jacob. The name Jacob means deceiver in Genesis, right? That's a story. That's a story there. Even through was deception right? Was God pleased with the deception? No. But when he repented, when he came and he turned to God, God is even able to use his deception and turn it for good. God is able to turn the brother's sin, the brother's evil, wickedness, and jealousy against Joseph, and they put him in a pit, and they slave him, they sell him as a slave. Even such an injustice in his life, God is working through it. God is working through it. Is that right? Is that good? No, it is not. But God is able to turn it. God is able to turn even the famine, the famine that is come to destroy the lives of people. God is using the famine to bring about his purposes. God is using Pharaoh's evil plans. Right? Why? Because Moses needed some training. We're going to see this next week. Moses needs all kinds of training to lead the people out of the desert. But yet, even through Pharaoh's evil and murderous plans, God is working. God is working. No, no, God is not absent. He's working. God is working through the simple faith of Moses' mother. God is working through the tenacity of the sister, her watchful eyes. God is working through the compassion of the daughter. God is working through all circumstances to bring about his purposes. You with me? You sensing it? Hey, I want you to understand this. When you talk about the verse Romans 8:28, and it says, we know all things work for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. And we know this by heart. We understand this. God gives a principle in Romans. In the New Testament, God gives us a principle. In the Old Testament, God gives you an illustration of it. How does all things work together for good? This is how. You're reading it. You're reading it. You're seeing it. God is able to work. God is able to turn. God is able to restore. God is able to renew. Can you trust him? Can you trust him? Can you trust him through that? I was reminded of my mother even as I was preparing this. My mother is a simple woman. She passed away several years back, and simple woman, right? Simple teacher. She worked almost 40 years teaching. But she loved Jesus. The only memory, the strong memory we have of her is, she will just open. She had a big kind of Bible. She'll open the Bible. She'll read the Bible sitting in the dining room, right? When we want the dosa, she'll make us 10 dosas each, and then she'll start reading the Bible, right? And she'll just, very simple faith. We've seen she was an evangelist. So many of her students came to faith, right? She was so courageously share the gospel with people, so gentle, so compassionate. I've seen so many young girls in our house coming and really listening and hearing about Jesus, crying and being prayed for. My mother was just simple. No stage, no nothing, right? And yet her life was full of suffering. Suffering. We only hear parts of the stories, right? My mom will say something, but she won't tell too much. But one of her parts of the story, when she was young, when she was 10, her mother passed away. My grandmother passed away. So my mother and her sister were growing up with the grandfather. And the grandfather decided to marry another lady. But that stepmother was just cruel, right? My mother was basically like a house help. Right? She was basically a house help, helping, taking care of things in the house, taking care of the cows. She had cows at that time. Cows, vessels, cook, go to school, come back. This was her life. When she turned 18, the stepmother decided to marry her off, right, to a constable. He's a drunk constable who was living in that kind of area. They know the person. They said, okay, we'll get rid of you, right? But my mother escaped and went to the hostel. She studied to become a teacher. Just cut off from family, just alone, just fighting in this world alone, right? And then she meets my father. They decided to get married. My mother's father doesn't show up for the wedding. He doesn't show up. My father's family doesn't show up, right? They decided not to show up. So finally, they get married, and my mother used to tell the pastor was the one who walked her down the aisle because nobody showed up for the wedding. So she gets married to my dad, and they're staying close to my in-laws. One day, she comes home from school. All her things are on the road. They said, no, you cannot stay here. You need to leave. Right? Man, intense suffering, intense humiliation. Right? And so they leave. And I remember when we were born, when we were young, my dad really had a health crisis. He was going to die, right? Back then, he was going to die. But my mother just was praying and just being strong, right? I remember when she finished 40 years, or whatever that years she finished in school, when it was time to get her benefits, right? Retirement benefits, to get the pension. It was a corrupt school, run by the church and all that, right? Corrupt school. They decided not to give her retirement, no benefit. She walked away. She said, it's okay, I don't care, I don't want your benefits, right? Simple woman, simple faith, but intense persecution in every turn. There's so much suffering. And in the end, she, when I moved to Delhi, she finished, she got retired. And for some reason, she got this early dementia. We don't know exactly what it is, right? She started losing her memory. She wanted to retire, enjoy the grandkids, enjoy whatever, travel. Turned 60, retired. Within a few months, she became bedridden. Bedridden. For 7 years. Just, she was not able to recognize, she was not able to eat, she was not able to do anything, just bedridden. She lost everything. And so sometimes, and I was reading and I was thinking, like, has God forgotten her? What about her faithfulness? What about all of those things? What about her generosity? What about her courage? What about her compassion? Has God forgotten all this? Is it all for nothing? No, my friends, no. I want you to know, when I said, and I was in the US at that time, and I had gone with this whole dream of making it big, right? And I did have all the resources to be able to just live a life, certain life, right? But I felt God calling me to ministry. I told my mother, I said, Mom, I'm going to leave and I'm going to come back. My mother was so happy. She was so happy. She said, you need to get into ministry. Right? That was her faith. And to see her, but God is reminding me, no. Nothing is out of his plan. The fact that I'm here, right? To preaching to a people I don't know, serving all of you, knowing, or it is because of that simple faith of the mother who prays and she's faithful. And we're going to be talking about all her faithfulness for eternity. My friend, that story is your story. Your faithfulness. God, your faithfulness for Christ is never in vain. Your courage for Christ is not unnoticed. Your compassion to people because of Christ is not unnoticed by this God. He sees, he hears, and he's involved. And he can turn all your loss, all your pain, all your suffering, all your stupidity. If you can come and you trust him, he can turn all of these things for your good. He can turn it. Sometimes we're able to see it very quickly. Sometimes we don't. I remember when I decided to move to Delhi, we were living in the US, and I like to plan, right? I like to plan these things. So during my third year of my seminary, we made a trip to India. We said, okay, we're gonna decide where to move. So I went to Hyderabad, I went to Bangalore, I went to Mumbai, and we went to Chennai, 4 cities. We said, God, show us where. Where do you want us to go? Where do you want us to spend the rest of our lives, right? And there was an opportunity in Bangalore. This person in Bangalore said, hey, we would love for you to come and plant a church. I said, okay. Everything was sealed. I had a job meaning I knew where I was going. So third year I finished. I've got 1 more year in seminary. So I come back after third year summer, come back to the US. I told all my friends, this is where I'm going, right? I had a plan. I had everything. Everything was planned. December, I've got 6 months to graduate. December, that person calls me and says, Ranjit, sorry, we are not going ahead with this plan. Everything crashed. When I say something, I want to do it, right? I was so humiliated to go back and tell my friends, tell all these people, you know what, again, I don't know where I'm going. I have no idea. I don't know where I'm going. It was humiliating. It was filled with anxiety because we're going to graduate. I'm going to graduate soon. I'm going to leave. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's going to happen. It was an anxious moment. I didn't know. But even through all of that humiliation and even through all of that disappointment and all of that delay, I don't know why this person said no, whatever that is, even through all of that, God is working out his plan. And within a few, I'm able to see everything that was a loss for me, everything was a delay for me, everything was anxious. God has turned it and redeemed it already. Right? My friend, I want you to understand. Sometimes we may not see it like that. Sometimes we may not know, but I want you to understand. He is working his providential plan through your courage, through your faithfulness, and through your compassion. And he's working his providential plan through all circumstances. But the greatest proof of this, we have the proof of this in Scripture. We have the proof of this in each other's lives. But the greatest proof is in the gospel. Hey, 1400 years later, after the life of Moses, There was another deliverer who's coming, but there was another king who was maniacal. And he was going on a rampage to kill every baby boy under 2 years old. But at that time, God is going to use another woman. In this place, Miriam is there, but there is going to be another Miriam there. Another Mary who's going to come. Miriam is Greek, Mary is Hebrew, right? This is Hebrew, Mary is Greek. There's another Miriam, another Mary who's coming. And her simple faith. She says, Lord, let it be done according to your will. I'm your bond servant. Simple faith. She has no idea what's going to happen. Simple faith. God is using all of that. Here is a baby taken to Egypt. Moses is taken to the palace to be saved. Here is this Jesus who's going to be taken to Egypt to be saved. Here is Moses that is drawn out of water, but here is Jesus who's going to come out of the Jordan River as he leads and proclaims the kingdom of God. Here is Moses who was doomed to death by Pharaoh's decree, but turns into an instrument of deliverance. And Jesus was doomed to death on the cross, but he rose in victory over sin and death. My friend, this is what God is doing. God is bringing about his salvation, not despite Jesus' death, but it is through his death. It is through his death. It is through his suffering he is bringing about victory for you. It is through his suffering and his death he is bringing about salvation for you. And God tells you today, if you will trust him, and if you will be faithful, if you will be faithful in obscurity, if you will be courageous in adversity, if you will be compassionate in hostility, I'm going to help you overcome things just like Jesus. You're going to experience his resurrection power. You're going to experience his providence. You're going to experience the purposes of God. Maybe you will never see it in your lifetime. Maybe you will never understand it. But there is a time when God will unfold his redemptive story, and you're going to stand in amazement of what God does. So I want to encourage you today. Maybe you're going through intense suffering. Maybe you're going through prolonged delays. Maybe you're going through seasons of life where your prayer seems to be not answered. Maybe you're going through periods where your cries seem to be unnoticed. Maybe you feel all alone. You're feeling all alone. Hey, I want you to know there is a God who is working for you. There is a God who is working through you. There is a God who is with you. If only we can trust him. In a moment, we're going to participate of the Lord's table. We're going to hold the elements. We're going to hold the cup and the bread. The question in our hearts is, how can I be faithful? God, how can I be faithful? I don't have the strength. How can I be courageous? No, I'm too afraid. How can I be compassionate? No, I struggle with forgiving and loving people. How can I do this on my own strength? And Jesus says, no, it is not on your own strength. I want you to look at the cross. I want you to know that Jesus was faithful for you. He was faithful in the suffering that he faced. He was resolutely faithful because you were his joy and his crown. He was faithful. He was courageous. When he faced Satan in the wilderness, he stood courageously during times of adversity. When he faced people who betrayed him, he showed compassion. Jesus did everything for you to accomplish your salvation. How can you be like him? When you see what he has done for you. When you see what he has done for you, the extent to which he went to give his life. Moses was spared, but Jesus was not spared on the cross. Why? For your sake, so that we could be part of his great plan. We could be called the children of God. So as you hold these elements, my friend, this is your story. You're part of a great redemptive story. His blood was the payment. His life was the ransom. So that you can be released from your burden and slavery to become the children of God. Let's pray.